Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Gorapati from Cambridge Lab. With me is my colleague Manish Mathur. Today's session, we are going to be covering digital workflows for new product introduction excellence. Before we get started, I would like to share our agenda. So we are roughly split into three sections. One is, we would like to briefly introduce ourselves and introduce the type of work that we are doing in new product introductions. And then we will cover a few topics that we have learned about in our experience in over the several years around new product introductions. The topics include, how to improve speed and visibility of NPI project execution. It's something that we have observed that requires a lot of attention, and there are some innovative approaches that we have seen work pretty well. The second one is around component engineering. I'm assuming a lot of the teams that are here, people that are here are very involved in working with supply chain and different components that suppliers are providing. What are some of the best practices that we have seen? Third is we are going to look at engineering change management. To us, and what we have seen is that it is a lot more than changing parts, and what is involved in that. And the final topic today is around the type of process and data that comes out of NPI process, and what are some of the downstream workflows or processes that take advantage of that and need to use it to improve the overall NPI program. During this, as we cover these topics, we will be showing some of these techniques using a demo, using our workflow engine, and both throughout the time, you might have some questions. So what we have done is assign the last 10, 15 minutes for Q&A. However, it is likely that you will actually have some questions while the session is going on. So if you have any questions, one thing we would recommend is that in your Zoom tab, there should be a Q&A tab that you can type in your question. So that one thing that would help is that we can keep track of the questions, and in the last 10 minutes or so, we can answer each of those questions. In case we run out of time when we are for this session, we can always answer those questions as part of the follow-up that we will do, which is we will be sending out the recording and the presentation that we are going to use today to you after the session is over and the video recording is available to us. Okay, so with that, let's get started. A little bit about Cambridge Lab. So we are based out of California and Texas and a few other states in the US. We primarily work with organizations in these industries where design, new product introduction, supply chain are a key aspect of their operations. And we have quite a bit of experience, operational experience, the team at Cambridge Lab, as well as technology that supports these operations. Okay. A little bit about the panelists today. So I'm Chris Gorapati. I have over 20 plus years of experience in NPI, supply chain manufacturing, and also in software. Manish has a similar profile and experience. Worked a lot in the automotive industry, and as well as supported a number of major software transformation initiatives at these organizations. Okay, so if we think about NPI, then many of us, anybody that is on the session today, as well as us personally, have been involved in NPI over the years. So one thing that we have seen change over the last few years is that there is no such thing as a simple product anymore. Even like the simplest toy has They sometimes are fairly complicated. They have software, they're connected. So there is no more of a very simple product that is common. Okay. The other three big challenges are common across all products, whether simple or complicated or the most intricate ones, right? Which is, how do you scale to efficient volume production? Because that makes or breaks an organization or an NPI program if you cannot scale to efficient volume production. The second one is, NPI programs are always pressed for time, and it is critical to be on time and actually have a flawless launch. The last thing you want to do is launch and have lots of problems afterwards. And of course, the new issue that is on top of the minds of everyone right now is if you are in fact dependent upon the supply chain, whether it is for manufacturing, testing, or components that go into your product, the complexity, or rather, how you manage your supply chain has become very, very important. Okay. So these are some of the new and traditional challenges that are still uh, in the face of most NPI programs. And one thing that we also wanted to highlight is, if you are in an NPI program, there are a lot of aspects to it. And the scope, as a matter of fact, continues to increase. These are, I know this is very busy, but it's only part of what is involved in new product introductions, right? And regardless of the communication technology, Zoom, and everybody staying in the same office, what is still an issue is the process and information silos are obstacles here, right? There is one view of the world in marketing, things that are happening in engineering, which needs to be transferred to manufacturing. So the silos, whether they are visible or invisible, still are an issue. And of course, when you have supply chains involved and that are involved in design of your product or assembly test, the complexity is even higher. And one thing that we have noticed is given the amount of cross-functional work that happens in NPI and the systems that are involved, what is important is how do you orchestrate this whole process? And that is one of our key topics here today, right? How do you do an NPI program at a high level, but still have the visibility and the execution capability at the lowest level possible, right? So these are some of the challenges here that we've seen from an overall NPI process. So what we have seen when you're addressing or rather taking on NPI programs is the overriding need is, how do you improve speed? Of course, quality is a given, we'll take that as table stakes, and visibility of NPI projects or programs. One thing that we have noticed is a lot of organizations do use project management tools. So if we come to that, many industries have very elaborate NPI program strategy or methodology. I have a couple here. One is for medical devices, the other one is for automotive, right? So if you think of medical device, they also have a normal phase gate approach. The other APQP, Advanced Product Quality Planning, also a 5-phase model. Now, there is not necessarily a very strong or stringent gate in APQP because you also do want to do some simultaneous design and process development when the program is going. So there are a variety of modes of how NPI programs are run. What we have seen is that a lot of organizations use different tactics to handle NPI programs. Now, some organizations just use projects, right? Microsoft project. Some organizations have somewhat of an intricate process. And whether it is practiced manually or using a digital process or any other method, they do tend to follow a process. We've also seen the most recent entry, which is called a Kanban board. To a large extent, it is nothing but moving things around, objects or tasks, etc., on different Kanban boards. It has some commonality with project, but it looks a little bit different. Now, we've seen that a lot in software industries, the use of Kanban boards to manage NPI programs. And all of them, if you use one or the other or the latest entrant into this game, one thing that you will miss and observe is, hey, NPI is actually a combination of all of these different techniques. Often you need to organize it as a project. You will see a lot of different workflows within the scope of the project. And there is also some aspect of just finishing tasks as part of that project or program. You can consider some of these terminology also applied to the program. They are very, very similar to a project. So the challenge that most people face when you practice this is that, the real need seems to be a combination of all of those. And we've seen that repeatedly happen in a lot of NPI programs, if you just consider it as a task management or project, you completely lose visibility of what is happening with respect to each of those tasks. A task could be, show up nicely as a task in a project, but it could involve quite a bit of underlying work and workflows and process and people involved in that. It's not one person doing a task. It could be a very, very cross-functional process. So we've seen that need. And what we've done is come up with a technique where you can actually combine both the process aspect with projects, or take a project and say, we're going to execute many of those tasks as workflows. Okay. So that, when you apply that approach, there seems to be a little bit better, or actually not a little bit, a lot more visibility into how things are happening, who is involved in each of those project tasks if we want, and what is the actual execution of specific tasks within the project. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you how we implemented these techniques. We have a couple of ways to approach. One is you can view it as a project and then add workflows to specific tasks, or you can actually describe the NPI process as a process. And then within the concept of processes, you can still run everything as a task. And the combination thereof. So there is no end to the variability that you can achieve with that mode. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take you through a system. So this is our workflow engine that a lot of our customers use to support NPI and a few other types of initiatives that they have from a process improvement perspective. So what you're seeing here are different workflows. Some of these things are like different projects and different aspects of NPI, right? So if you think about NPI, there are lots of things that happen, from a high-level program management to product planning, actual engineering process that happens, any component engineering that is common. Sometimes you have to also develop suppliers as part of the NPI project. And of course, validation, verification, and everything downstream that happens from manufacturing, quality, etc. Right? So let's first look at our concept of projects and how do we achieve some of what we are talking about, mixing up both project mode and process mode to improve the speed and execution of projects. Okay, so we have, for example, we've taken the example of advanced product quality planning. That's a methodology that you can use for NPI. It's very good, in our opinion. It may be very elaborate for certain types of products, but you can trim it out and then achieve what you want to um, do for your product. Okay, so here is an example of um, advanced product quality program for Z Phone X. So we want to do a 2021 or now 2025 late edition. So there are different elements of that are required uh, from an overall program perspective. There are certain risk items, but the important thing is how do we want to execute this NPI program? So as we had discussed in advanced product quality planning, product NPI program, there are 5 stages. If you consider it as or phases, right? So there is phase 1, plan and define. There is phase 2, product design and development. There is phase 3, process design and development, validation. And once the launch is done, NPI launch, you do an assessment and take some corrective actions. So if we look at it, it would be like a workflow, right? So we are following a traditional process. So this is a process at a high level, NPI process. The challenge is NPI process, also if you open the NPI process, each of this phase 1 actually runs like a project, right? So we have different elements of the project: organized team, defined scope, feasibility review, and there are people assigned to this to complete these tasks. And as a task completion, they might do all of this in a different place or even within here in the scope of this, but they will be completing these as tasks. Okay, so traditional normal method. So we've combined the process and added a project as one of the major elements of that process. Once all of these things are done, the team comes together, they will review, right? And some of this, it's already underway. So that's why you're seeing this. So they've reviewed it, they accepted the project, so now they can move on to phase 2. So there is a gate here, review gate, right? That happened. Now you are in actually product design and development phase, and there's actually a project that got kicked off here. And if you notice, many of them, it's like underway. It's halfway through, and there are some tasks that have completed. There are certain three tasks of that phase that are currently underway. Now, one thing that we do know is one of the tasks here is a release engineering drawings. Now, release engineering drawing is not a task. It's a pretty elaborate cross-functional process that people have to do. Now, what we have done is, since there is a extensive workflow capability, what we assigned to this task is this needs to be executed as a workflow. And we're going to use one of the workflows that is designed here and kick it off to complete this project, complete this task. So here you can see that something has been kicked off. And if I open it, it is actually a workflow that is currently running. Okay, so we have to release a port front. There are a number of people that are involved in this process. At a high level, if you think about it, this shows up like a task, but underneath that task is a pretty elaborate workflow that is happening, right? So if you're running an NPI program, you want to know what is currently going on. And connecting these workflows to these tasks actually allows you to execute that whole workflow under that task. So that's what is happening here, is where for the RF front end, we are currently doing component manufacturer qualification that's going on. And the people that are involved in that includes engineering, manufacturing engineers, design engineer. There's a CCB element to it. So once this whole workflow is finished, right, and releasing the product into some of the bombs are going into SAP and so on and so forth, right? So there are a lot of things that are happening here as part of this workflow, that once this is finished, it involves the correct people, right people, at the right time as part of completing these activities. And once this is finished, is when this task is completed. So imagine the difference between someone coming and saying, okay, I've done the task. This is the normal project mode approach versus actually executing a workflow under this task. So now you have complete visibility into what is going on as a program management team. And also, you have the option to participate in that and finish it. So not only are you managing the project at a high level, but you're also bringing in all the people under this project and helping them execute the project. So you can go to the level of complexity or need that you have in an organization to execute these NPI programs using these workflows, okay, as tasks. I mean, oftentimes there are a number of different workflows that you can set for each of these tasks, and they will be when the task is active as part of the project, instead of someone saying, I've completed this task, this actual workflow is running underneath it. The correct people involved, the data is all there, and it's connected to other systems. So the full breadth and scope of NPI programs can be managed through this fairly effective approach that we've seen. There is also another method that we've seen works pretty well. This is a little bit simpler in some cases, is if we open the project, many people are very comfortable using also just projects as a method of uh, executing NPI programs. It's the same project here. If I open it, so here you actually have the option of running everything like a project. So in the previous method, we've seen running it as a workflow, and within the workflow, we execute projects. And those projects have some workflows assigned here. So the simpler approach some of our customers do is, hey, we still have a project. We are very project oriented for NPI, but some of these we do want to run as these tasks within the project as workflows. Like design reviews will happen as a workflow. So when you select process as the method of task or a type of task, so instead of people coming and saying, okay, I've completed the task, it'll execute a workflow. So, and then you can still select, what type of workflow makes sense for different tasks types, right? So we are looking at design reviews. So we might just do engineering change orders or any of these types of workflows that are available to run it, to use it as a as a workflow to run under for tasks. So very, very effective that we've seen for executing NPI programs both as a combination of project plus process, and generally you're orchestrating it then. Okay, so that's one that we've seen work very well. I mean, you can still use any other techniques that we have seen, from process stage gate approaches and medical device NPI. So they all still look the way that you'd want from a workflow perspective, right? So you can design it and run these workflows or projects as NPI projects completely from an execution perspective. So that's one thing. So if you have any questions, feel free to type into the Q&A bar, and we will be monitoring and answer all the questions towards the end. The other thing that we have seen here is component engineering. It's become rather very important now. It has always been important, but it's even more important given all the changes and some uncertainty in general, especially in high-tech supply chains and high-tech component manufacturers. So one thing that we have seen is when you are practicing what we consider to be the field of component engineering. There are three main aspects to it. One is, do we have, as engineering teams are specifying or selecting components, either from a catalog or from um, even design to spec type of manufacturer suppliers. Things that you need to do beyond design include making sure that you actually have some engagement with the supplier manufacturer, get your allocation. Do you also need to understand that, are we single sourced, multi-sourced, and also know the impact of some specific components on revenue, right? How much of this component influences our overall revenue, right? A small resistor somewhere, could impact quite a bit of your finished good revenue. So that's something that, as a cross-functional team between engineering, sourcing, and quality, you need to be very, very um, aligned and work as a team. The two other items are some things that we have seen that a lot of organizations struggle, which is changes, manufacturer part changes, right? So whether it is things that are going out of end of life, or the suppliers or engineering teams finding better suppliers, manufacturers, things change quite a bit. And each of those creates a lot of work impact within the NPI and sustaining engineering processes. So you need to be able to do this fast and efficiently. And the last aspect of it is, when things are changing with respect to your manufacturers, component manufacturers, a lot of times they are phasing out products, they're making engineering changes, and they'll send you PCNs. And it may create quite a bit of impact on your overall product lines, right? And depends upon how you from a regulatory perspective or a customer communication perspective, what you need to do if something of your manufacturer suppliers change. Right? You may need to do nothing, or you may need to propagate change across the board and communicate it to customers. And also importantly, your supply chain team may need to actually have a strategy in place to handle these, what we consider to be end of life issues of your components, right? So we've seen these scenarios, and what we have designed with some of our customers is an approach to handle these using different workflows. So the one thing that we do keep track of is within these workflows. To support these various workflows, we do have all of the product information. For example, if I pick, where is my favorite part here, product, Z-Phone X. So we do know what the products are about, what are the different components that are going in, and who are the different manufacturers, for example, suppliers who are providing it, manufacturer part number that we are using, because this information is essential to support some of the different workflows that what are essential from a good component engineering perspective. Not only that, we also have a thorough understanding of, and this is depending upon what terms that you use, most often that we see commodity as the way to organize within your team, especially component engineering teams and sourcing teams. They all work hand in hand many of the time. So they will organize the teams accordingly, and this is propagated everywhere, right? So when people are creating parts, they know which commodity it belongs to, and when they know or qualifying suppliers and manufacturers, they also know, who the suppliers are for different commodities. Okay, so once you have this, you can use this information to essentially organize yourself and organize the work that happens with respect to it. So the types of workflows that we have seen are in the beginning, during the change. They're essentially, as part of change, the change could be driven by most commonly as PCNs. And then, what do you do from a component overall end of life perspective, right? So those are scenarios that we have seen everywhere. And if I go back and select some of these, right? So we've seen that the NPI programs can kick off these types of workflows. And what is inside a workflow here, right? So let's look at that. Part of what we are doing when we are uh, qualifying new components is a very cross-functional process that happens with different people involved in it. So you have all these different members of your organization, sometimes even from a supply chain, they'll show up. They may play a different role, but they will follow this overall process, right? They'll say component engineering. When a new component is coming into the organization, there is a review, supplier quality review, purchasing, CCB has to approve, and CCB can include a lot of different people involved in this. And once that is done, it's not over, right? So if you are actually releasing this part, um, we call it envelope tracking IC here, you might actually have to go and set up, um, create these items in your design engineering system or ERP system, update the approved vendor list in ERP system. There's a lot of work that happens just bringing in one component, right, or multiple components in one shot. So that orchestration, that overall process needs to be supported very well. Okay, and that's what these workflows accomplish. And once that is done, the other thing that we've also seen is, when people are um, doing components, one of the things that is very, very useful is to know. And the only way to know the impact of a component is to understand, how components are used across the board. Something that we've done as part of PCN analysis is if you these when you have manufacturing parts, you need to know where they are used and what are all the different assemblies. This is one way to see what impact. And when you marry this information with your sales and operations and ERP systems, finance systems, you will know what is the impact of a specific component in terms of revenue, in terms of customers, right? So that will give you some indication of how important from a risk perspective that you need to handle. Okay, so the other one that we wanted to highlight, which is very popular among our customers, is when you get PCNs from your component manufacturers, what do you do? How do you handle the overall process? Because this can actually create quite a bit of impact within the organization, amount of change that you would have to tackle, and amount of communication that may be needed, right? So what we have done is created a unique process workflow here where when you get a PCN, so if you look at this workflow, once you get a PCN, you bring in that information from the manufacturer. If it is one part MPN, it says, last order date. This is the MPN that the manufacturer released, issued a PCN for. And next thing you know, what it does is it goes through the database, parts database, and looks at what are the parts, our internal parts affected by this PCN using this matching of manufacturer part numbers. And we've seen that because of the intricacy or differences in which everybody manages their manufacturer part information, you'd have to use some very innovative fuzzy matching techniques to understand what are some of the parts that are matching that are impacted by this PCN. Okay, so you run a search, and then once if you find one or more components that are affected by the PCN, you will also then select, what are all the different assemblies that are affected by this PCN, right? So here we have found that there are 3 assemblies. This is because it's the matched part. They are used in these 3 assemblies. One of that is a sub-assembly. The other 2 are actually finished goods, right? But we need to know where all the ones are located. So once you have that, you can then go ahead and plan your change. How do you want to handle it? So what is the impact of this PCN? Do we need to issue component change requests for this? So here it actually kicked off saying, hey, we need to actually create a new or alternate manufacturer for this component because this end of life is happening soon, right? And so through these linked workflows, you can make the overall component engineering process very, very, very efficient. So we've also actually have component engineering workflows for quality test validations. We've often seen signal integrity, etc. Those types of workflows all happen through the component engineering area. And people, most of our customers design, however they want to run this type of workflows. Okay. So if you look at it, we even have around end of life workflows, whether it is product or internal component end of life scenarios to look at, what is our current demand, what is the typically what should we do with respect to, if a component is going end of life, should we issue a last time buy or should we requalify and use up all the existing inventory, right? So things like that, are very, very important from a uh, like a decision making as well as execution perspective as you are going through these types of changes. In our experience, component engineering requires its own what we would call core competency, understanding of the challenges that you have, as well as different workflows to support the work of component engineering teams. We've seen that traditional techniques may or may not work. Often we have found component engineering teams have their own processes, application, way of doing things, which is, very valid, but it's a major area for improvement as part of the overall NPI process, in our opinion. Okay. So with that, we want to cover one other thing, which is pretty related, is engineering change management. I know a lot of NPI, once the product, we think of the overall scope of NPI, we release a product and move on. It is okay, that aspect, but there is, for many, many products, there is a very long sustaining engineering period where a lot of change comes, both from a improvement perspective as well as failures and quality related issues perspective. So when we look at engineering change management, this is another area that we think needs to have extreme level of, I would say, competency for organizations to work. And also, workflows are one of the best ways to institute that competency, okay? And making sure that things are happening fast, properly, and with some visibility to cross-functional teams. So if you look at engineering changes, there are 3 major buckets that you can think of where changes come from, because one is failures and quality related issues, right? RMAs, customer complaints, non-conformances, so on. Second one is product and process improvements. So you do continuously can look at improvement opportunities and drive change through that. And the major one is also something that we've seen is supplier-driven changes. Suppliers also drive a lot of changes. They are continuously, especially in tech, high tech, there are lots of end-of-life PCNs that come. They also might suggest improvements, right? So all of this will create a lot of change for you as an organization. And then you have to organize it as what are we doing here, right? Are these just improvements or change orders, different types of change orders, different types of process change orders, or is it a new release that we are doing for our existing product? And you can package all of that as different things, right? There's brand extensions, upgrades, features, and so on. So a lot of engineering change happens. Thing that is interesting about engineering change is we've seen that engineering change seems like, oh, we just need to release a change drawing or a change part and we are done with it. And that is not the case, right? There is a lot of implementation that actually happens after the engineering change is released, right? One is you got to make supply chain changes. You have to make, tooling, quality type of changes. You have to dispose of depending upon what the engineering change indicates. You may have to communicate it to customers. A lot of stuff happens, right? So when we think of engineering change orders and change requests, we see a very elaborate process. So here is an example of a process that one of the example, right? So here we are doing the change, and if you look at this workflow, you would be very, um, I would say puzzled or impressed, right? The level of effort, the work that happens. One is, just getting the document control. Often we've seen engineering change stops at, okay, we are done, we released, CCB approved, we are done, released, and the notifications go. What actually happens is a lot more than that, which is, there could be different sites that are impacted. You have to communicate all that to there, implement the changes in those sites. You may definitely have to go and update a lot of the systems. Like here, we are updating the bombs, automatically update the routings, and then you have to send customer notifications, update drawing revisions. So here, if you think about it, you are creating about 30 or 40 follow-on activities that happen, right? So the amount of actual work that happens in an ECO can vary from some very small steps to very extensive implementation activities that are common, right? Especially if you're thinking of supply chain, you may also need to communicate to the supply chain, make sure that they are implementing the activities that are assigned to them, and the work happens. Now, one of the things that is very, very normal as part of this engineering change is what happens from a data perspective, right? So a lot of these we've noticed in terms of workflows. You do have engineering systems like Agile, Team Center, Windchill. There are a couple of things that happen there, right? One is they usually do these releases as something called a release, or especially if it is new component, or if there is a change, there is a concept called engineering change notice. So that's how they come out. Now, there's a lot of data that comes through these, and using that information, you may have to actually do some follow-on activities, downstream process, what we consider, which is supplier manufacturer qualification. We have engineering manufacturing process tooling changes. You have to maybe even create change master data. So if you're have parts that are being released. If you have an Oracle or a NetSuite or an SAP, you have to create materials, you have to create bombs, and you have to set up the AVL. So there's a lot of master data change that happens. This is something that we have seen is for many of our customers, it's a pretty imposing task. how do we do this in a very systematic manner, efficiently, and on time? So there are some workflows that we have actually developed to support scenarios like this, where, for example, if we look at the new board development and release process, right? So here is an example of one such um, going. So there is a part of this NPI program, there is a new board that is being released. So we have that here. It includes this material, this part. There are a number of components underneath it with certain quantities, costing. And if I open, there is actually, in fact, even qualification that happened. There is an AVL. They've already selected that. So all of this needs to be, it doesn't stop here, right? There is a lot of other activities that happen as part of this, what we consider to be NPI process and downstream impact. So the downstream impact, you can see that is we are selecting a new component manufacturer, right? So if you think of that, we actually have a Texas Instruments is being selected as part of this. Look at it. Here, the information is being originated from the engineering system, but the documents, the drawings, uh, the part information, etc., is going through as part of this process. Okay. And coming back to the workflow, here, we are doing supplier quality review, all using that information as a downstream process of this in release or ECN. So there's quality review that happens, the CP review, and as part of that, the master data is created. So there is a material that is created in Agile, an item. Same item is also created in Oracle, and then we update the AVL in Oracle, right? So you have to handle very intricate process and using the data that comes out of these systems. So if we go back to our where we came from, we actually came from board, right? So the board actually includes all of this data, the bill of material, this becomes a finished good, and it has all the drawings, the schematics. All of this information is used by downstream, for when you're qualifying a supplier or sharing this information with supplier, but also to set up build some material, create materials in SAP, release the BOM to MES. There's a lot of master data work that happens too. So a systematic way of setting up a workflow as well as handling the data and connecting to those systems is very, very effective and extremely useful from an NPI process perspective. So one thing that we do as part of that is to actually connect directly to the systems within the workflow so that people don't have to go ahead and manually do a lot of work anymore. So these are connected to various systems that are relevant. So here we have primarily SAP, but you may actually have other systems depending upon the scenarios that you have to support. So here, there's Windchill, there's Oracle. So you can naturally see systems also as part of the overall NPI process. Some are giving the information to the workflow, and the workflow is using that information, transforming and putting it into another system like an ERP or supply chain system, or use it for supplier communication, supplier qualification. So this continuity of process and data going through to downstream process is very, very useful and important to accomplish what you want to do from an NPI perspective. So, in summary, what we have seen when we are using these types of approaches for NPI is that very, very effective in terms of improving the speed of NPI programs, number one. Second is from a launch process. Launch is all about having good control and visibility of the overall program, but everything that happens underneath that program, like all the different workflows, the data, the systems that are involved in that. And once you have that visibility and control, people are doing everything in a systematic manner. What you will see is fewer pre and post-production launch issues. Most definitely, post-production launch issues are something that you do want to minimize. And these are some of the most effective ways that we have seen for you to accomplish that using these connected workflows, project management, the actual data from design systems flowing through these workflows and being used by cross-functional teams and other systems. Okay, so that we will pause and see if we have teams have any questions. Let me see the Q&A. Feel free to type in any questions you have. Yeah, so one question that so we have is this can you import projects from other systems? We tend to use existing like a Microsoft project or um, other like we've seen some Jira, etc., being used for NPI. Yes, we as a matter of fact, we implemented techniques to directly import, Microsoft project type of XML files that you have. So if you select new, you can import projects from other systems and then execute the different workflow that you have. Okay, as part of the work tasks become workflows. The other thing that we are very use is, there are project templates that you can use to execute a lot of the different uh, types of projects that you may want to run. So then, you have a very systematic approach, a template-based approach to run NPI projects. Okay. So there's another question on, are these workflows something that come out of the box, or is it something that you can design ourselves? By and large, the workflows that we see here are based upon what your organization practices as NPI processes or component engineering processes. So they will follow what you have as a process, and there is a fairly easy way to design these workflows. And you can set it up. Mostly your business teams can do it yourself, or your IT team can also configure these workflows. And there are different, essentially 2, 3 different elements to it. Not much, which is for example, if I select this, there are different roles that are involved. There are members that may play a role, and you would definitely select, what is the actual steps of the process that we should follow. Okay, so this is something completely accessible for your team to design based upon the workflows, the process that you have in place today. Okay. Uh, any other questions, please type in. Okay, we see a chat question. So the question is around product data. Where do you get it from? So if you think of product data, I mean, essentially we are dealing with parts and related information, right? So most often the product data for us comes directly from either uh, the engineering systems, PLM systems that you have. Most commonly we connect to systems like Agile Team Center. There are instances where our customers also use this directly as a means of handling product part information and master data for materials, manufacturers, suppliers, and any other commodity related information. Okay, so this becomes the place where they manage everything. And the system, because of the type of workflows that are flowing through, we do support full-fledged life cycle of that part, or a material that is going through. So if you look at this phone, not only we have full understanding of what it is, from a costing perspective, where it is going to, which plants it'll be manufactured. We also have the full supply chain information, bills of materials. So if you look at supply chain assessment, you will have more information around. So let me use this one to show it to you. Right. So let's look at the phone X. Right. So the multi-source assessment. So for us to provide support workflows and provide decision making, so we do have all of the information with respect to the product or products, all of it. So that includes both the suppliers, AVL, AML, and the overall structure of the setup that you have. Okay. All right, so we are almost in the last 2 minutes. One thing that I do want to close, as you can still continue to put in your questions. So the system that you're seeing, the workflow engine, is used a lot by, I would say, across many industries, from automotive, high tech, consumer product goods for their NPI programs. What you can, if you're interested, is also try it. If you think some of this will make sense for your organization, we can support it within our own environment, or currently we are supporting this process where people have installed it within their environments because they wanted to connect it and see to their internal systems and see how it works. That is also something definitely possible. We would be more than happy to engage and support it. It'll be free, of course, for you, right? So because you want to try it, see if it will be effective. We think it will be, because we have seen significant improvement across the board from an NPI and all the underlying processes with respect to NPI. So if you're interested, once you get the recording and the presentation, you will have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. Within, like, say, tomorrow or so, we will get the recording from Zoom. We will do a little bit of a cleanup of that recording. And between the recording, the presentation, and the Q&A, we will be sending all of that in email by next Monday or Tuesday. Okay, so you will have all of this information that is presented. You are free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or want to see how this approach might work for your NPI process improvement. So if you please feel free to send us an email and we will be in touch. Okay. Again, thank you for taking the time to join this session. We wish you a very great rest of the day, and thank you again for joining.